want to make sure you get a dry scallop, because what happens is, when you get a dry scallop, that means they pulled it out of the water, it was this size. You cook it, it's going to be this size. When you get a processed scallop, that means it's been soaked in a brine, you know, it may be this size, and then pumped up to become out this size. And then when you cook it, it's smaller than this. That's dry scallop. Yep, that's what you want. And you always, I mean, even though it's a dry scallop, it's still going to have some moisture on it. We want to take the moisture off, so about 10-15 minutes before you're ready to do it, slack it out on paper towel. That'll pull the moisture out. The tendon on the side where it connects, this is not really edible. It's tough. You don't want to throw it out. You want to pull it off. Save these, put them in the freezer. When you get enough of these and some shrimp shells, you can very simply make a bisque out of it. To make a bisque, all you need to do, you're welcome, all you need to do is saute some mirepoix, which is carrot, celery, onions, a little bit of tomato product, let it caramelize, add the shells and those pieces, let that caramelize, sprinkle a little bit of flour, just enough to soak up the oil and it coats it, it kind of looks like wet sand. Then deglaze it with brandy, bourbon, sherry, marsala, something sweet, let that cook down, add a little bit of chicken stock or vegetable stock, and a little bit of heavy cream, cook it down, strain it out, and then you have a bisque. Now, the first thing I did was turn this pan on to get it start getting hot. Now that the pan's a little bit hot, we're gonna add just a little bit of oil. And notice it has that ripple effect, and the second the oil hit the pan, it was no longer viscous and thick, but more fluid. That's what you're looking for. The only thing we want to put is a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Speaking of salt and pepper, there's only 2 seasonings. Who knows what they are? Salt's one, pepper's not the other. Sugar, exactly. Sugar's the other seasoning, and the reason for that is salt and sugar are the 2 things that are naturally found in everything. So you're seasoning it, you're not changing the flavor. You're just adding or subtracting what's already there. Notice the pan is smoking. That's what you're looking for. Anytime you put something in a pan that has oil and it's hot, you tilt the oil away from you and you put the protein or whatever it is away from the oil, and then you tilt it back and the oil comes back on it and you don't get burned and the person next to you doesn't get burned. And now when I was talking about letting food sit until it's ready to come free, you'll see that on these scallops. And now that we got the scallops in there, we'll tilt the pan back towards us and put the scallops away from the oil. The other important thing when cooking is you do not want to overcrowd your pan.
Don't leave too much on the pan.
You want your pan to have just enough to cover the surface of the bottom where there's some space in between the food to allow it the heat to go around. If you overcrowd your pan, what happens is the temperature drops dramatically and you lose that sear. It takes longer to come back up to temperature and things stick and it doesn't cook evenly. Every once in a while, you always just want to give it a push on the side just to see, the sugar may be caramel and it may be clinging to a piece of the pan that, a crevice in the pan, the caramel oozed in there and it's locked in. So you always want to just give it a little touch. See how that guy just came off on his own? Now what you want to also notice is the cooking process. You don't want to let it do its own thing for too long because it may overcook. So you may have to accelerate the gas and speed up the cooking process. You always put the seasoned side down first, so you can then season the other side. Technically when you're cooking fish or chicken, traditionally with French cooking you would use white pepper because you don't see the speckles. It's a little bit more refined. White pepper tends to, however, to be a little bit hotter than black pepper. And I don't mind the speckles. I don't care if it has a little bit of speckle. I like the color contrast, so I tend to like a freshly cracked black pepper over a freshly cracked white pepper. Now let's take a look at the scallops for a minute. Scallops, very important. Do not overcook them. Scallops, when you cook them, should look like an Oreo cookie. They should be white, translucent, and white. All right, you want them to be a little translucent in the middle. Otherwise, they're like it's like eating rubber. See how easy that came up? See how this one's sticking? We want to let it sit a little bit. So what we need to do is turn that flame down just a little bit. You can see how the scallop, the raw scallop, is very opaque. You see how these guys are starting to get white around the edges? That's what we're looking for. See how they just pop up on their own? That one, see that guy, he peeled off a little bit because I forced him. You don't want to do that. See how he just popped up on his own and how perfect it is? If you eat food that's spicy, it speeds up the digestion process and it's out of your system in like 10 hours, 8 hours. So if there is bacteria in there, it's out of your system before you get before it gets a chance to settle in. Now, notice how short I cooked this guy. That's it. That's all you need. These little ones. You want it to be slightly translucent in the center. It should kind of look like an Oreo cookie. See how this is starting to get white on the bottom, but it's not quite there? You should have white, and then you should have translucency in the middle. I had to take those guys out because they were slightly overcooking. We don't want to do that. Now you just want to add a little bit of butter to richen this up. Not a lot, just a little bit. Everything. So you're not altering the flavor, you're enhancing the natural flavors. That's why they're seasonings. You're adjusting the natural seasoning. It's not burnt, that's not garbage. We don't want to get rid of that. This is what the French call fond. Okay? This is flavor. This is going to be delicious. And I'll show you how to not break your arm cleaning that pan. Being that I have one saute pan left over here, and I have a couple more things to make, I need this pan. It's deglazing. You're gonna deglaze the fond and break the fond up from the bottom of the pan. That was just white wine. You can very simply use water, any kind of liquid, water, chicken stock, vegetable stock, whatever you want. But notice how that pan is becoming clean. So this little bit of butter right here is all I need.
That's sweet butter?
Always. You always cook with sweet butter, not salted. This is a gorgeous sauce. And all I did was save myself from having to scrub the pan in the sink and put a little bit of wine and butter. 2 ingredients. It's the fond, a little bit of liquid, whatever liquid, and then some type of butter or creme fraiche, or a little bit of heavy cream, whatever you want, but you let everything reduce. Let it do its thing. Have the patience and the love to let it do what it's meant to do. Just reduce it down. Because by the time you get a crust on the second side, it's going to be overcooked.